I'm a slash-a-holic, addicted to the fray. Be seen in your dream. No. Don't be afraid. This time, it isn't one of your nightmares. This one was mine. Freddy? Well, just remember, all you have to do is dream.
I can make you mine, taste your lips of wine, anytime, night or day. The only trouble is, gee whiz. I'm dreaming my life away. I need you so that I could die. I love you so, and that is why whenever I want you.
A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. A fan novelization by Jeremy Terry. Chapter 5, The New Kid. The kid looked to be about 16 or 17 years old and strung out worse than Maggie had seen in a long time. There were deep purple bags beneath bloodshot eyes that were constantly shifting about the room as if the boy was unable to focus on any one thing for very long. Maggie took in his dirty clothes and the fresh bandages on his head and hands and then pulled out a small pin light. She clicked it on and tried to shine it into his eyes, but his fidgeting made it impossible. Finally, she put a hand on top of his head to hold him still. "Sorry," he said sheepishly. "You're jumping around like a live wire, John," she said as she finished her examination and put her light away. He looked up quizzically. "Who's John? Is that my name?" "John Doe," Maggie replied, "as in we don't know your name, but need to call you something. Is there anything you can remember? How long have you been awake?" "3 days," he replied. He jumped to his feet, startling her, and began pacing back and forth, chewing his ragged fingernails. That's as far back as I can remember." "Well," Maggie said, "it looks more like 3 weeks to me." John laughed without humor. "That's the wonder of amnesia. It always keeps you guessing." "How about where you came from?" He looked away from her to one graffiti-covered wall as if the answer she wanted might be written amongst the jagged lines. "I don't know. My head's a mess. All I know is that wherever I'm from, I'm the last." "The last what?" Maggie asked. Another turn. "The last survivor. Hey, you wouldn't happen to have some caffeine pills or maybe some coffee or Coke?" Maggie raised one eyebrow. "I meant the soda," he clarified. "I don't think that's a good idea. You are already in an agitated state, and I'm frankly concerned about your heart. Why do you want to stay awake so badly?" He stopped pacing and faced her, his haggard face sincere in its obvious fear. "Because if I sleep, I'm not waking up." "What makes you think that?" she asked. "I don't think it," he said. "I feel it. I'm telling you, if I fall asleep, there is going to be trouble." Maggie stood and walked around the table to where he was and put a hand on his shoulder. "There won't be any trouble. You are perfectly safe here, I promise." He gave her a wan smile and resumed his pacing. "You can't protect me in my dreams. You can't save me from him." "Him? Who is he? Who are you talking about?" John's brow furrowed in concentration. I can't remember. It's on the tip of my tongue." He spun and punched the wall in frustration. She grabbed him and forced him down into the chair, holding him with firm gentleness. "Calm down. Everything is going to be all right. Just rest here for a few more minutes until we get a space set up for you." All the fight seemed to go out of him, and he went limp beneath her hands. "That's it," she said. "Just take it easy. I'll be back in a few minutes." She turned and walked out into the hallway where Kelly was waiting. She glanced through the little window in the door and saw John laying his head down on the scuffed table in front of him. "What do you think, Mags?" Kelly asked. She looked back to him. "He is a very troubled kid, paranoid, suffering from severe sleep deprivation. He seems to think some man is after him. I'm afraid he needs more help than we can give him. I want him transferred to Mercy Hospital first thing tomorrow morning." "Roger that," Kelly said, jotting down some notes on a clipboard. Tracy and Doc Cotto circled each other around the mat. Tracy's face set with determination, Doc's with perpetual amusement. She lunged forward, aiming a swift crescent kick at the older man's jaw. Doc dodged easily. "What's this stuff got to do with my dreams anyway?" she asked as she threw a jab. Doc blocked the punch, sidestepped away to widen the gap between them. "I told you. It helps with concentration, and concentration helps with meditation. Meditation helps me get in and out of my dreams," she finished. "Not just your dreams," Doc said. "I told you that with the right amount of discipline, you could move in and out of anyone's dream. But that's a little too advanced for your ass right now." "Oh, yeah?" He blocked another strike with ease. "You're not going to hit me until you learn to see beyond the obvious." "Watch me," Tracy said, redoubling her efforts. John jerked awake and looked around in a panic. He'd only laid his head down for a second. He hadn't meant to drift off. He looked around frantically, seeking any sign that the room was changed, looking for any danger. His gaze was drawn to the graffiti on the wall behind him. Where there was once a gang tag, there was now a detailed painting of a screaming blonde girl being lifted off the ground by a television with arms and a hideously burnt human head erupting from it. There was something terribly familiar about the burnt head's hooked nose and malicious glare. Words were scrawled over the picture in bright red paint. "Welcome to prime time, bitch!" A creak of rusted hinges behind him. John turned in his seat to see that the door of the interview room had opened on its own. A thin, greenish mist floated over the floor, reached into the room with ethereal fingers. He stood and walked into the hallway. "Hello? Is someone there?" "I'm here," said a breathy female voice. John turned and stared down the hall and saw a little girl in a dress standing 20 feet away. Her hair was brown and tied up with red ribbons. "Little girl, where are we?" She smiled, her grin growing wider and wider, and he saw that her teeth were crooked and dirty like a witch's in a fairy tale. He heard a meaty ripping sound and saw blood fly as her cheeks tore open from the corners of her mouth to her ears. "Oh shit!" he screamed, retreating a step. Writhing eels and snakes oozed from under her skirt over the misty floor and began to squirm towards him. John had seen enough. He spun on his heels and sprinted away down the hall. He rounded a corner, took another step, and his foot touched open air. He pinwheeled his arms, but gravity had already claimed him. He fell through the mist into a cloud of hot steam and came down hard on a metal catwalk. "Fuck!" he moaned as he rolled over and sat up, wincing at fresh bruises that covered his body. Steam hissed from hot pipes and boilers. Filthy water dripped from rusted pipes to pool on the concrete floor 10 feet below. "I'm in a boiler room," he thought as he got to his feet. The realization sent fresh spikes of fear coursing through him. Faint images of a shadowed figure wearing a red and green sweater flashed through his mind. Then it was gone before he could catch hold of the memory. Clacking footsteps behind him. What now? He turned to see a goat coming towards him out of the shadows. It tilted its head and he saw that something was wrong with the shape. It stepped closer, and he saw that it had the face of a man with black eyes. It opened its mouth to bleat, but what came out instead was the strident scream of a small child. John turned to run and found himself facing a solid brick wall. He turned back, saw a burned man wearing a dirty hat and sweater standing where the monster had been. He charged forward and struck John a backhand blow to the face that sent him falling over the catwalk railing to the concrete floor below. John landed hard, rolled over onto his back, and found himself laying on the floor of the interview room staring up at the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. "Did you have a nice trip?" asked a deep, menacing voice from above him. The table creaked, and the burned man came into view. He was perched on the edge of the table like a gargoyle, his bladed gloves swinging back and forth between his knees. "Wakey, wakey," said the demon. "You've got work to do." He reached up and slashed the light bulb with the razor glove, shattering it. Glass rained down towards John's face. He lifted his hands to shield his face. John fell from his chair onto the floor as the light bulb exploded. He struck hard and groaned, wiping sleep from his eyes. He sat up, looked around. Everything seemed normal. Gone was the green mist and steam. Gone was the boiler room and its monstrous inhabitants. Orderlies walked back and forth outside the closed interview room door, each lost in their conversations, each unaware that a teenage boy's life had been hanging by a thread right by them. He picked up a shard of glass and carefully twisted it between his fingers. He began to laugh, and laughter turned to sobs as he dropped the broken light and buried his face in his hands. Something strange happened. Doc Cotto was sure of it, though he wasn't quite sure what that thing was. It was a feeling akin to a phantom itch that he couldn't quite scratch. He dropped his guard and Tracy was waiting. She swung her fist into his abdomen and landed a solid blow to his solar plexus, doubling him over and sending him falling to the floor. "Yes," Tracy beamed, jumping up and down with her fist over her head. "I did it! I got you!" Doc didn't reply. He was chasing the itch. He was getting closer. There was something about a boy, and the painting in his office. The one of the dream demons. "Doc, are you okay? I didn't mean to ring your bell quite so hard." The feeling dissipated into smoke and vapor, gone out of reach. He looked up into her concerned face, and suddenly he felt bone-crushing weariness come over him. He tried to sit up and found the effort too much. Tracy offered her hand and helped him to his feet. I'm okay," he replied, shaking his head to clear the cobwebs. Let's pick this up later." "Sure, Doc," she said, her young face lined with worry. He wished he could say something to make her feel better, but the fact was that he was worried too. Something is coming, he thought, as he walked Tracy to the workout room's door. "I'm afraid we aren't ready for whatever it is." Chapter 6. Two Dreamers. John wasn't into poetry. At least he wasn't as far as he could remember. The fact that his memory spanned less than 4 days didn't give the opinion much credence, however. He could be a poet himself for all that he knew. Scraps of a poem by Robert Frost kept running through his mind, and the implication behind the words gave him pause. The darkest evening of the year. The darkest evening of the year. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. John glanced up at the old clock on the wall over the dormitory entrance and saw it was nearing midnight. He turned away in desperation, looking for anything to focus on that might help him stave off sleep. The darkest evening of the year. It certainly felt that way to him, and dawn was 1,000,000 miles away. Many miles, and God help me, he didn't want to sleep. Groggily, he took up the song he'd been singing before the poem filled his head. 4,567 bottles of beer on the wall, 4,567 bottles of beer. If one of those bottles should happen to fall... "Yo!" shouted one of the boys trying to sleep 2 rows away. "I'm gonna break one of those bottles over your head if you don't shut the fuck up." "I'll hold you down while he does it," shouted another. "You don't want to know where I'm gonna put the bottle," said a third. John considered going on, but decided he was not that far gone that he would commit suicide by a juvenile delinquent. At least he wasn't yet. He closed his mouth and stared up at the popcorn ceiling, trying to pick out shapes and patterns like a person cloud watching. His eyelids began to droop immediately. He wasn't going to make it. A tear spilled over his eyelid and ran down his cheek. "Oh, Jesus, I'm not going to make it." In another part of the shelter, Maggie sat brooding over her new case. She opened John Doe's file and flipped through the typed forms until she came to a photocopy of the newspaper article he'd had with him when the police dropped him off. She picked it up and studied it closely. "Springwood," she whispered. The headline read, "Kruger Woman Still Missing." Below this was a grainy black and white photo of a woman wearing a plain-looking sundress. In the photo's background, towering over her, was... Maggie leaned forward in her seat, gasping as half-remembered images from her recurring dream flashed before her eyes. The little girl with the red ribbons playing tag in a fenced-in backyard. A man chasing her as she laughed, and a water tower looming over it all. She read the article once and then again, seeking any bit of information that might give her a piece of the puzzle that had cast a shadow over her teenage and adult life. Nothing jumped out at her. What was she missing? She stifled a yawn and kept reading. The water tower was so bright over the trees that it looked more like a lighthouse to little Maggie Burnham. The man chased her around the flower bed and towards the swing set, his fingers reaching to tickle and grasp. She giggled, moved out of his reach. She wasn't ready for the game to end yet. "I'm gonna get you," said the man. He ran around the swings, and Maggie realized she could see more of him than she had before. His wasn't what you'd call a handsome face, with its hook nose and widow's peak. There was something in his eyes that spoke of a predatory nature barely concealed. His smile, normally false or mean-spirited, seemed genuine only when he looked at her. He'd once told her that she was the kindness in his world, and that he could watch everything burn and still be happy, as long as he had her. She'd believed him. At least she had. She'd believed everything he said until the screaming started. The woman was crying out in terror, her perpetual shriek, Maggie's nearly constant companion throughout her life. The man froze in place for an instant and then turned. Something different. The dream didn't end where it usually did, and Maggie looked towards the house to see the cellar doors flung open, and a woman in a plain sundress came stumbling out. She was pretty in a simple sort of way, but her beauty was marred by the sheer fright that distorted her fair features into a caricature of themselves. "I won't tell!" she shouted, going to her knees in front of the man. She clasped her hands as if in prayer. "I won't tell a soul, I promise!" The man studied her in silence for a moment, and then he reached for her. His hand changed. Where once there were tickling fingers, there were long, sharp razors that sought to tickle the skin right off of the woman. He slashed out. The newspaper clipping on the desk beside Maggie's limp hand was in frantic motion. The trees swayed as if whipped about in a high gale. The woman in the picture thrashed from side to side, her fingers clawing deep, bleeding furrows in her cheeks as she shouted over and over again, "I won't tell! I won't tell!" Maggie jerked away as if she'd been slapped and looked around. She rubbed sleep from her eyes and glanced down at the still newspaper clipping on the desk. There was something so familiar about the face, almost as if she and the woman in her dreams were one and the same. But how could that be? A thrill went through her as she stood. The dream had gone on longer than ever before. She'd seen the woman's face. Sure, it only raised more questions than she'd had before, but it was progress. Maybe there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe she could find her way out into the day and find out what it was like to be free. She closed the file on her desk and began to gather her things. A drop of warm water fell onto John's nose, and he sat up in his bed, swiping it away. He looked at his hand and groaned when he saw that the palm was bloody. He glanced around to find that the boys' dormitory was gone, replaced by a dark bedroom in an advanced state of disrepair. He looked up to the ceiling and saw a wet patch of crimson spreading overhead. A fat drop formed, grew pregnant with foul moisture, and fell onto the bedspread. Somewhere close by, a family of rats squeaked. "I told you he'd make you help him." He looked to his right and saw the little girl from the plane standing beside his bed. She looked the same, her hair tied up with red ribbons, her skin porcelain, her eyes bright. "Help?" he asked, bewildered. "Help who? I don't understand. Tell me what you mean." "I'll never tell," said the girl, giggling as she turned on her heel and walked out of the filthy bedroom. John tossed the moth-eaten bedclothes off and followed her. He looked around the foyer and into an adjacent living room, where broken furniture and mold covered the floor. The place was so familiar, and yet that fact brought him no comfort. Instead, he felt as if he were missing something of vital importance, something that could spell the difference between life and death for him and others. He turned to his right and saw that the girl was already halfway up the staircase to the second-floor landing. "Hey, wait a minute," he called after her, starting up the stairs. The shelter was quiet, and that fact bothered Casper very much. He'd been a night shift security orderly at the shelter for 6 months, and he'd never heard it so peaceful. The little shitters didn't know the meaning of the word quiet and would never know the value of a peaceful moment. They were too busy frying their brains with their video games, rock music, and drugs. He'd been a child in the 60s when the whole world seemed to be going crazy because of the shitters. One day, his grandfather had taken him aside and had a serious talk with him, one that had left an indelible impression on his young mind that had lasted through his adolescence and into his adulthood. "There's one thing I gotta tell you, Chrissy," said his grandpa. "My name is Casper, Gramps. I don't know anyone named Chrissy." "What? Oh, it don't matter much," Grandpa had said as he absent-mindedly stuck his hand down the back of his pants and scratched his butt crack. He pulled the hand out, grabbed Casper's face with it, and said, "There's one thing I want you to remember, boy. If you don't remember nothing else I ever say to you, I want you to remember this. Drugs are bad, okay? So don't do drugs because they're bad." Simple words, but full of the God's honest truth. Just take a look at him. Sure, he wasn't a rich man, but he'd never been arrested, nor had he ever been forced to live in a hellhole like the shelter. He had a wife, 2 little kids who absolutely would not grow up to be shitters like the kids in his charge. It was a nice life, something to be proud of. He stood up from behind his desk, pulling his pants up over his bulging belly, and set out to walk the halls. He swung his key ring on the end of one finger as he went. Somewhere, someone was doing something they shouldn't be doing, and he was going to catch them at it. They would be very sorry when he did. You could bet your bottom dollar on that. John walked on the air rising from the shelter's dirty floor towards the ceiling. He reached it, passed through as if it were made of smoke, and walked on down the second-floor hallway like a ghost. The upstairs hallway was just as bad as the foyer below. Cockroaches crawled behind rotting wallpaper, eating the glue and whatever else they could find in the old house. John could hear them as they scurried over the wood. He saw an open door to his right, heard the rustle of the little girl's dress as she walked. He turned into the room, ready to demand an explanation. The words died on his lips. Where he'd expected to see a little girl's room full of dolls and frilly things, he instead found a stark white padded cell like he might find in an insane asylum. Where he'd expected to find the girl, he found a distraught man. The man was secured in a straitjacket, and he sat in one corner with his face pressed into the padded walls. "Hello?" he asked, taking a tentative step into the room. "Who are you? Where did the little girl go?" The man went rigid and then turned slowly to stare at John. John stumbled back out of the room, terror thrumming through him as he realized the man in the room was himself. "Free me, you idiot!" the other John screamed. "I'm your fucking memory!" Casper saw the teenager boy walking around the corner and smiled. He'd been right. The kid was out of bounds after lockdown. he was breaking the rules, and Casper would be sure that he suffered the consequences. He picked up the pace, rounded the corner, and ran headfirst into the kid's back as the kid barreled backwards out of an open broom closet. Both fell to the floor. Casper landed hard, rolled over like a beached whale, and made his way clumsily to his feet. "Now, look here, you little shitter! Just what the—" Casper stopped short when he saw the terrified look on the kid's face. He was looking around like he didn't know where he was or even who he was. This wasn't some kid trying to steal something or looking for a place to get high. He heard approaching footsteps and looked up to see Maurice, the other night shift guard, running towards him. "Casper, what's up?" Maurice called between gasps for breath. "I heard you yelling." "I'm not sure," Casper replied. He glanced down at the teenage boy who was still lying at his feet. "I think you better go see if Doc or Maggie are still here." Maurice frowned, taking in the scene, and then turned and jogged off in search of one of their bosses. Okay, Slash-a-Holics, this has been chapters 5 and 6 of A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, by Jeremy Terry. Really great story advancement here. I like what he's doing, with the stuff. I know he's, taking the movie we've all seen and making a novelization of it, but I enjoy the way he writes the scenes and puts us into the characters' heads. He does that very well. And, the whole thing with Maggie and her nightmares, seeing her dad running around chasing her, trying to tickle her. I'm not worried about spoilers for Freddy's Dead. If you haven't seen the movie, you shouldn't be listening to the novelization yet. You should watch the movie, then listen or read the novelization. Her dad and her mom. And, I get what she means when she says it's like, even though she still doesn't have the answers she wants, just having more of the picture, is just such a big relief for her. It's like an itch she couldn't scratch, and now she can actually reach it. And I really enjoyed that. I also enjoyed John's journey into his dreams, the freaking goat with the human face and the black eyes. Bah! Freddy running at him. Just everything was great about these chapters. So much fun. Casper's grandpa reminded me of Mr. Mackey, so I apologize for doing a bad Mr. Mackey. Okay, drugs are bad, okay. Shouldn't do drugs, okay? They're bad. Drugs are bad. All in all, great chapters. So excited to dive deeper into this novelization. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for allowing me again to narrate one of your books. Everybody let us know, me and Jeremy know, what you thought of tonight's chapters. If you're enjoying the novelization so far, what are your thoughts on Freddy's Dead, the movie, compared to what you've heard of the book so far? Because I feel like the characters are going to be a lot more fleshed out and we're going to care for them more. I think that Jeremy's going to really take us into their minds, into their souls, and make them more than one-dimensional characters there just for Freddy to kill. But yeah, here's my question for everybody for the comments section. When was the first time you saw Freddy's Dead? And what did you think of it? Were you an 80s and 90s kid that had seen the other Freddy movies first and then saw this one? Or were you somebody that got into horror later in life, or you weren't born until after these movies were made and only recently have you got into them? Let me know in the comments section. What was your first experience with Freddy's Dead, and what were your first thoughts when you saw the movie? I look forward to hearing from y'all, and I'll reply and share my story with you as well. I'll be back very soon with more of Freddy's Dead, and I'll be dropping Chapter 8 today as well of Primal, my newest Jason novel. Yeah, and you can also buy a copy. You saw the information on the screen. You can buy a copy of Halloween Massacre by Jeremy Terry on Amazon, ebook, paperback, hardcover, and he's got some original books on there as well. Check that out. In the near future, I will be narrating Hellraiser 2 by him, Bone Tomahawk, and he is currently writing Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, and from what I've heard so far, he's going to really make that movie into a much better novelization than the movie is, and hopefully we'll see more of New York in the novel, and maybe, you know, a little more fun stuff on the boat. You can't really get rid of the boat. But there was, like, you know, a lot of characters that just died on the boat from the fire and the water and all that. Jason didn't even get them. But Jeremy might be able to write it where Jason did get some of them. So we'll see. If you want to support the channel, you can do so in so many different ways. The biggest way to help the channel is to click the like button. If you haven't done so already, to subscribe. Click the bell so you always know when new content's coming, and comment on the videos. All of that interaction really helps the channel get put into the algorithm and recommended to more people, and just spreading word of mouth about the channel helps so much. Let your friends and family know if they're into horror. And if you want to go a step further to help the channel, you can do tipping on the channel. You can do a super thanks comment on any video. There's a PayPal information for a super thanks tip, as well as a Cash App. All that information is in the pinned comment description, or you can become a channel member or a patron. Also, that information is in the pinned comment and description, along with our merch store, our Cameo profile, and you can even buy one of my books on Amazon, Quarantine, a Friday the 13th novella, or Celestial Slumber, a Nightmare on Elm Street novel, Freddy X. Both of those books are available in ebook, paperback, and hardcover on Amazon. Links are in the description and pinned comments. Until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, be excellent to each other, and pleasant dreams, bitch! And for real, don't do drugs, okay? Drugs are bad, okay?
Of the night, with tales of horrific might, Josh spins his airy weave in the stories we believe.
I'm a slash-a-holic, addicted to the fright. Narration so hypnotic, Josh